Greetings and welcome back to the fourth video in this 14-part series about CAD and more specifically Fusion 360. This video will be about sketches. You can see I added a fourth column in the Excel called Wheel Project. We're going to be making a wheel throughout this series. It's very important to have a continuous project that we work on so that you can see how things come together and you will see your knowledge grow with the project. I chose a wheel. It's quite a good project because you'll be able to see a lot of these specific advanced operations while you're making the wheel. So it's actually quite good practice before you make any CAD, any drawing, to have an idea in your head of what you want to create. So we want to be making a wheel. I'll be drawing with my mouse, so it's not a drawing class, it's a CAD class, but you should be able to understand my point. So we want to create an object in 3D. The object will look something like this. So it's going to be a simple wheel for now, and we'll add more complex features later on. So a sketch is a 2D object, drawing, that you want to create, and you will then extrude into a volume. So you should have in your head the object you want to create, and with this, so that's the wheel we're going to be making, you want to select a face that will be easy to sketch out and that you will easily be able to extrude. So extruding is taking a 2D surface and pulling it out into the third dimension, like this. So for a wheel, the ideal surface to create a sketch of is going to be this face right here, because it's a simple 2D face that you can extrude into the volume. This object we call 2.5D because it's a 2D object that's the same on every single plane. Typically this is ideal for 3D printing because the printer adds layer after layer after layer. So if you flip the wheel up, you could print it from the bottom up. So, a sketch. Next thing we need to know is the concept of an origin. So when you work in Fusion, let's go back to Fusion. Let's first save our file as first sketch. Click on the button, save. So once again, it will save in this repo. I will call it first sketch. All right. So you can see the name changed and it's appearing. I'm going to now close the repo so we have more space. So I can show the origin of the model right here. By clicking this left button, which is actually an eye, you can view or unview different parts of your drawing. So here I just showed the origin. Okay, now that the basics are down, we need to select a face of this origin. So you can see there's two faces, the one between Z and Y, this one, between X and Z, this one, and between X and Y, this one. So of course, let's go back to our drawing. We need to tell Fusion which face of the world we want to be drawing this first sketch on. So once again, I go back to black. There is an origin in Fusion, X, Y, Z. Once again, not a drawing class. X, Y, Z. And we want to say, okay, I would like to create this face, for example, on this plane. So for that, I need to select the XZ plane. Let's go back to Fusion. This would be this one, XZ. So I'm going to rotate a bit. And before you put down your sketch, you've got to press the Create Sketch option right here. Left click, you can see it's blue, and it's now waiting for a plane. When I select planes, you can see the grid that's moving along the 3D world. So we said XZ, that's this plane. All right. Now we're in sketch mode. You can see it by this blue button up here, this blue tab that just showed up. We can go back to solid as before, but we're still in sketch mode. So I'll left click back on sketch and I'm back on my sketch options. These are all the buttons you can use to create sketches. Once I'm done, I can press Finish Sketch. I'll do it right now. And this will bring me back to the home view and remove everything. You can see though, a new tab has popped up in the hierarchy called Sketches. If I click on this drop-down window, I can see my first sketch. It's empty, but it's here. If I now click on right-click, I can edit sketch. You'll also see that down here, which is the history marker, this is where all of your different objects, whether they're 3D or 2D, show up with no time value. Right here in the bottom, you have the same things that show up. You can see every operation you do on your model, but time goes from 0 to t. So on the left are the first things you've created, on the right are the last. Here we have one thing. So I can either right-click this and go edit sketch, or right-click this and go edit sketch. In any case, once I do it, I go back to the view we had before. So I'll actually close this again and show you a fundamental thing in Fusion. It's called parameters. I'm going to left-click this parameter or do Ctrl-Alt-F, and this shows up this tab. So in our drawing, you can see there's multiple things of different dimensions. There is, for example, this outer diameter of the wheel. Let's call it OD. There is this inner diameter of the bore. Let's call it ID. And there is this length of the wheel. Let's call it L. So let's say we know OD and we know L, but in ID, we'll be putting some bearings, some ball bearings, and we don't know yet the dimensions that the ball bearings are going to have. So we don't want to have to change the whole model. I'm trying to draw a ball bearing right here. We don't know yet the dimension, but it will be ID, and we'll set that later. So to do this very cleanly, you can open up parameters and call a parameter ID, and let's say we want it to be around, I don't know, 100 millimeters. So in Fusion, it's always in millimeters. You can set different units, but it's always by default in millimeters. Okay, I could also create parameters for my other parameters, OD and L, but there's no need for now. Let's press OK. So once again, I'll go back to my sketch, right-click, and go to Edit Sketch. So here are the options to create objects, lines in the 2D plane. The create options. Lines, rectangles, if you leave it to hover, you'll get other options, circle, arc, polygon, etc. We'll start by making the simple inner, no, let's do the outer diameter. I click on the first point and you see it snaps. So I'll talk about this later on, but it's called constraints. If I click on the center points, I just left clicked, I now put down my circle and I can drag my mouse out and it creates a different dimension circle. I'll put it down to any dimension. I will now set the outer dimension of my circle. I'll press Escape to leave the circle menu. Once again, click on Sketch Dimension on the outer diameter, and you can see it shows up my dimensions. I left click again to put it down, and now I can edit this field. Let's say I want it to be 200 millimeters. So I need to zoom out. Perfect. Now you can see the circle right here that used to be blue is now white. That's because we have fully constrained the model. I think I will just switch my display settings from dark room, which is the dark mode, to the normal, I think, photo booth that Fusion uses normally. I think so. Let's see. I think it's this. So you can see the different colors. So I just switched it to black now. It used to be white, now it's black, but same thing. So if I delete this, let's left click on this and delete it. You can see it turned back to blue. So this means it's not constraints. Not constraints means I can left click on my circle and make it however big I want, because you need a parameter more to constrain the sketch. So I'm going to add my dimension again. and add 200 again, and you see it goes from blue to black. Black means constraint. So I could do the same thing with these buttons. You don't actually realize it in Fusion because it's quite well made, but you're actually using these constraints by using the snapping of the model. Let's say I want to put a line down. If I put a line between this center point and I drag it left, you can see this tiny little blue icon next to my mouse, the one with the 2 lines and the 3 vertical lines. That's actually the same icon than this one up here. It's saying that it's making a horizontal constraint, and you can see it snaps to the red line, which is the horizon. So I could do this, and I could make it, once again, you see, it snaps to the circle and gives me an X. X means coincide. So I just added a line with 2 constraints, actually 3. Coincide with the center of the circle, coincide with the outer diameter, and be horizontal. I could also not snap anything and put a random line here, let's say. Press V to stop adding lines. You see it's all blue. I can press escape to stop adding lines, and I can now pull this point and bring it wherever I want, because it's not being constrained. You should never make models or sketches that are not fully constrained. You could do this, Fusion lets you, but if ever you change any parameters, these lines are not constrained and they'll go wherever they want. They don't have any rules. So I could add the same constraints that we had before, horizontal and coincide, by clicking on these buttons of the constraints. So let's say I want to add first a horizontal constraint. I clicked on horizontal, and I'll now click on the line, and boom, it now snaps to horizontal, and it becomes black. Escape again, but it's not fully constrained, even though it's black, because there's this white point that's just a white point. I can therefore pull it more or less long. You can see it's actually blue here, the point, because it's not fully constrained. If now I add a coincide constraint between this point and this diameter, it doesn't like it. Maybe it wants the diameter and then the point. So escape, click it again, diameter and then the point. Now it's just made it coincide, and you can see the point has disappeared. This means it's fully constrained. So now if I change my model, 40 minutes later, it's not going to break all my 3D design because it's all been unconstrained and it's not finished. So I'll actually press escape and delete this line. Delete. I'll now add my inner diameter. Circle again, center point again. You can see it's made a blue round circle around the origin. This means, once again, that I've got a constraint. I've got a concentric constraint between the first point of my circle and this previous circle. I could also do this, click it, drag it, and now you'll see I'll drag it to any dimension, press escape, and I'll press dimension again. And now I want to dimension this to, we said 100, but I think it's 100, I'm not sure. I just think it's 100. So I'll put down my dimension and I actually write the name of my parameter. So I called it ID, and you can see it's bringing me ID. I press enter and it automatically rescales my circle to ID. And now I'll press Ctrl Alt F, bring back my parameters, and you can see if I change my parameter to 120, enter, it automatically changes the circle. You should really use parameters whenever you're not sure of a value of a dimension. Because if you don't use parameters and you need to change your model way down the line, it's way more complicated to edit 10 sketches that you've all put 100 millimeters for the ID, when you could just have put ID and it will change all the 10 sketches when you put 100 40 minutes later. Our circle is the right diameter, but it's still blue. That's because it's not fully constrained. If I press on the center point, I can move it wherever I want. I could have clicked on this one and snapped my circle to this, but I want to show you that I can also put it in the center and fully constrain it with two different methods. I could either add a coincide constraint between this point and this point. It will work. I'll press escape and Control Z. Or I could add a concentric constraint saying that this circle needs to have the same center, concentric, than this circle. They both work. I press escape. My sketch is now fully constrained. Before we close this tutorial about sketches, I'd like to show you a complex model so you see a bit more in the future how your sketches will affect what you're designing. So you'll learn how to do this later on. But for now, let's look at the sketches of this key. This is a key that you will be holding in your hand and you will use to turn something like a pinion like this. A gear with a square drive behind it. It's a key with a replaceable bit that's also square. Okay, so let's make one of these. Basically, we'll be making the vertical shaft and the horizontal handle. So let's first start by creating a sketch on the ground. Let's say we want it to be 20 millimeters. Okay. Now let's extrude it. We'll see this later on in the next video. But for now, stick along with me. So now we want to make a new sketch to make the handle. So once again, we need to select a face. I'll unhide the origin and I'll select a new sketch on this face. This face is in the center. If I rotate around, in the center of my previous object, and it's on a different face than the actual object. Because you cannot sketch on a round plane. You need to find a flat plane since it's a sketch. So let's go on the right, which is the plane I just selected. And let's now make, another circle up here to make the top of the handle. So I'd like to make this part. Okay, so let's say I'd like to make a circle that starts from here. Well, you know what? Look, it's not clipping. I could say, okay, well, that's fine. The green line is in the center of this tube. So I'll just go from the origin and then pull a line up and then stop it maybe here. Or you know what? No, I'll actually pull a line up, and since my handle is 100 millimeters, I'll enter 100 and I'm perfect. I found a point that now represents my handle. Great. So now I'd like a circle. So I'll put another line, somewhere like this, and then I'll add a circle, maybe like here, and then to the end of my handle right here. That's nice and centered. Perfect. Okay, so you can see that on this chuck key, the top is cut off. That's because I'll be 3D printing this chuck key. And 3D printers can print, so I'll be printing it upside down with this face on the printer bed. If I show you a bit how it'll look like this when I'm printing it. Okay, and 3D printers actually are able to print any angle that's smaller than 45 degrees. So this is 45, this would be 30, this would be 0. 45 degrees without putting any supports. So I'd like to have less than 45 degrees here, because if I have 90 degrees, like if I print the whole circle, well, my printer is going to slop down here because the plastic will be printing in thin air. So let's chop off the top of that one. So we said 45 degrees. So what you could say is, okay, let's make this line bigger. Now let's bring a line down, and let's say that we wanted to go, to the circle here, and I'd like this angle to be 45 degrees, as we said, 45. Great. You can see it's a bit sloppy, so I'll just take this point and pull it up so it looks pretty good like this. Okay. Now, if I chop off my circle right here, find a point where it's matching, like here, and then pull it across. If I chop off my circle like this, well, perfect. I now chopped off everything that's past 45 degrees. That's another great strong point about sketches, is that you can basically model parameters. You can move stuff around, add parameters, and see what it looks like. It's a great sketching tool for yourself to design what you'd like to design, because you're able to change just one parameter, like 45. So let's say I chop this off. We'll go finish, and then we'll extrude this. We'll extrude it symmetrically on both sides and this distance. Okay, great. Oh, and I cut it. I wanted to add it. So let's change that. Great. Once again, we'll see this in the next video. So you can see multiple things that are weird. First of all, there's this lip here. This is flat and it's a weird lip. And then here it's fine. Okay. Now let's say that my handle is a bit too long. I don't like it because it's a pain. I can't reach my spot because this is just too long. So let's go back and edit my extrude and say it'll only be 50 high. Now you can see that, well, my handle is not attached to the bit holder, the part that holds the chuck bit right down there. Okay, that's a bit annoying, but let's say that we don't do this, and actually we change this sketch, so we edit the second sketch, and this handle is not comfortable to hold. It's just too small. I need it to be bigger, the circle. So let's say that we actually didn't put a diameter on the circle. So let's put one. Let's say we wanted it to be 50. Okay, finish. And now the handle has a really weird V in it, L in it, and it's not really cut off, and the cutoff is way past 45 degrees. Like that's almost 90 degrees. Why is everything wrong? Well, let's go back to this sketch. First thing we did wrong is we didn't use this geometry. We just based our geometry from the plane, which kind of worked from here because it's a small cylinder that was extruded on the origin. But when you make a big model, it will not work at all. So let's delete all this crap. This is all wrong. Nothing is constrained. It's all blue. It's all wrong. Delete all of it. All of it. Okay. Now let's use the project tool. You'll use this all the time. You can find it here or press P. Project lets you project onto this plane, which is the sketch, any object that's out of plane. So I'm projecting this cylinder onto this 2D sketch. Project, okay. And you can see it creates purple lines. So this is the real line of where my part is in space, projected onto the face. Great. Now, let's say I'd like to have my circle of diameter, I don't know, 30. Let's say 30. So what I can do is now you'll see I'll switch my line type from normal, which is these white lines, to construction. I can press on this, or I can click X on my keyboard, and this toggles construction. Once I'm in construction mode, I can draw lines, and you'll see they'll be dashed, and they will not close. You need closed lines. You need these blue colored in planes to be able to extrude them into volumes. If it's just a sketch that's not closed, made by construction lines, you will not be able to extrude it. Look, well, it's all broken, but trust me, you won't be able to extrude it. So if I go back and edit my sketch, it really doesn't like it. You can see that this doesn't close. I can now click on an object that I put down already and press X, and this toggles the construction to full lines. Or I can just click on the line type. It toggles it too. And you can see when I change the last line of the triangle to a full line, then it closes the object. So you should always use construction lines for objects that you will not be extruding, but they are very useful to not clutter up your design. So we'll delete all this, and we'll make a construction line of the diameter of our circle. So you can see triangle means midpoint constraints, midpoint of this, construction, we said we wanted 30, so 30. Great. Let's take a circle and let's take it out of construction, press X, and go to the midpoint of this line. Let's go from here to that point. Now I'm snapping to the purple projected line from the model. Okay, makes us a circle of 36. You can see everything is white. It means it's all constraints. If I now add a dimension, press D or on this, you can see that it's going to tell me, look, it's over constraints, create a driven dimension. This means that I can now see the diameter of my circle, but I can't change it there. I need to change this dimension because it's already white. Everything is constraints. So if I want it to be smaller, I can switch 30 to 20, and you can see, boom, it goes down to 28. Let's go back to 30. So once again, we'd like to cut off the top 45-degree part of the circle. So let's do that cleanly this time. Now, let's go from the top of the circle right here and go back to construction line mode. And let's pull a line all the way up, all the way far, far, far. Great. Now, we'd like a line that starts on this line right here and that intersects, that is actually tangent to this circle and create a 45-degree line with this line. We'll take a line, once again, in construction, because we do not extrude this. All that we need to be in full lines, so not construction, is this line, so that we can extrude just the surface into a volume. So, Control Z, let's bring back a line in construction mode, and let's pull a line down, just any random line like this, a bit like we did before. A crappy line with no constraints at all, that if you change the diameter will break. Let's say that we want it to be tangent. So we want this line to be tangent, circle to be tangent with this line. Perfect. That's what we want. Now, we want this distance, so I pressed D to put a distance, to be, D works for linear distances or for angles. 45 degrees. Enter. Boom. Now, it's created a 45-degree line that is tangent to the circle and that coincides with this vertical line. This means that if I now switch out of construction, pull a line from this point, you can see the X, this is the point when the line intersects both the diameter of the circle and the tangent point of this line. If I pull it across to here and then intersect it with this line, right, I can now change this parameter, which will be my parameter for my diameter of my circle, change this to 50, and boom, circle is way bigger, but, oh, no, it broke, because I did it badly again. So you should really do this often, change your parameters to look at how your model works. So it didn't work, because I didn't constrain this line enough. So it was fine before, but it wasn't constrained enough, because I told this line, look, you need to start from a point in this circle, and you need to be vertical. I didn't tell it where it had to start from based on, the origin. So if I actually do this, if I say that it needs to coincide this line and this point, now it became white, this drawing line. It was orange, so it was not fully constrained. I made a mistake. If I switch it to 50, everything works perfectly well. And you can see, oh no, it doesn't. It doesn't. I made another mistake. So I clicked on the tangency and it snapped into, I thought this line had snapped into the tangency between this circle and this tangent line, but it didn't. It just snapped to this outer diameter. So let's delete this line and let's make when you want to add constraints manually, it's really good to just stay far from the point you want to be at. It really helps because you just need to do this and then you'll see it snap when it's at the right constraint. So I wanted to coincide from this point to this line. Okay, that's fine. And I wanted to coincide both this line and this diameter. So I'll press coincide both this line. You can see it's still blue because now you can go up and down vertically, and this line will still coincide this part and this part. Since it has no distance, it's not fully constrained. So I wanted to coincide with both this line and with this circle. Now it's white. And now your sketch is actually fully constrained. There is no orange construction lines, no blue drawing lines. It's all white. It means it's all constrained. I can switch this to maybe 30 again, and now it actually works as planned. It's good because I make mistakes, and I'm the one teaching. It's showing you just how complex this really is. Like, to do a perfectly constrained sketch is really complicated. It's not trivial at all, and people think that it's just a stupid sketch, but it makes a big difference. When you've got a good sketch, like our sketch here, that will always be at 45, you can now extrude this. So when you break an extrude or break something else in the model because you made a bad sketch, it'll be orange. Let's edit the profile. Nope. Let's edit this. Let's just delete it actually, and let's make a new one. Let's unhide the sketch and let's pull this and this a good distance as a join and a symmetrical. We'll see this in the next video once again. And now you created a much bigger handle. I can hide the sketch, and I can now edit the sketch diameter right here by changing this to 30. And you can see it works perfectly well and nothing breaks. So you can imagine that if you were to do this in a model that's very long and that takes you, hours to make, and that you work with 5 engineers on, and somebody at the beginning of the model history made a crappy sketch, and you realize that you need to change one dimension from the crappy sketch, but a week later, and 5 people have worked on his work and taken his sketch as a base sketch to draw their own work on, now you'll break 15 people's work for a week by having made a crappy sketch. So please make good sketches that are fully constrained, and it's going to help you and your team a lot and save you guys a lot of time. Take your time, really, sit down and look at the colors, make the sketch slowly and well. Typically here, if we wanted the parameter to not be this height, but to be the diameter of the circle, because now this is a driven dimension, and that's the driving dimension, so we could say that's actually not very comfortable for us. We'd rather have this be the driving dimension. We could delete this dimension. Now it's back to unconstrained. Delete this, and then add it again. And then now the one that's driving is this one. So if I change this to 30, same thing, but now you're driving by the circle and not driving by the line height that we decided to set the circle on the midpoint of that line. There we go. So that's about it. Once again, to see how all the parameters of the extrude option, which is the second most important option you will use, please watch the 5th video called Basic Extrude. So we're now done with the 4th video in the series, and the next one will be that extrude. See you soon.